Hey, it's Mr. Groff. We're going to talk about integers and absolute value. So our essential question is, what are integers and absolute value, and how can we use them to model real-world situations? A couple of vocabulary terms. First one is integers right here. That's the set of whole numbers and their opposites. So like 1, 2, and 3, -1, -2, and -3. Integers also include the number 0. When we talk about absolute value is simply how far away from 0 a number is if you would count it on a number line. So how do we know we're being asked to find absolute value? When you have a number, like here I've got the number 5, and it's surrounded by two vertical lines, sorry about my scribbly line there, that tells us that we're looking for the absolute value of the number in between the bars, in between the lines. So here, you can see here's 5, and here's 5 on the number line, so I can plot my point 5. And I want to know how far away that number is from 0. So here's 0, right? Well, if I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The number 5, the integer 5, is 5 spaces away from 0. Makes sense, right? So the absolute value of 5 is 5. It equals 5. What about -5? What's the absolute value of -5? Well, again, we want to plot it on the number line. Here's -5 on the number line. And again, I want to find how far away it is from 0 simply by counting the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. -5 is also 5 spaces away from 0. Therefore, the absolute value, the measurement, again, remember, of how far a number is from 0, is also a positive 5. Let's look at another example. What's the absolute value of -7? Again, we want to plot it on our number line. So here is -7 on the number line, and here's 0. And I want to know how far away -7 is from 0. So it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 spaces, 7 units away from 0. So the absolute value of -7 is positive 7. So if you're a little confused at how -7 turned into a positive 7, you have to remember what we're counting here. We're counting distance. We are measuring distance. And there's no such thing as negative distance. You can't walk -3 feet. You can't run -7 miles. No matter which way you're going, when you measure the distance you've traveled, it's always going to be a positive value. One of the things you're going to need to be able to do is to compare numbers written in absolute value. So here I'm being asked to compare the absolute value of 5 and the absolute value of -7. So I've plotted 5 and -7 on my number line. Here's 5, here's -7. I also plotted 0. Well, what's the absolute value of 5? Well, if I counted the spaces here, 5 to 0 rather, the absolute value of 5 is 5. And then -7, again, the distance to 0 is 7 units. So if I'm comparing the absolute value of 5 to the absolute value of -7, the absolute value of -7 is actually greater than 5, so therefore this statement would read the absolute value of 5 is less than the absolute value of -7. In this example, I'm being asked to compare the absolute value of -4 to the absolute value of -1. Well, the absolute value of -4, you can see, is 4 spaces away from 0, so that is a 4. And the absolute value of -1, that's 1 space away from 0, so that's a 1. So even though -4 is a lesser value than -1, when I'm just counting the absolute value, when I'm just measuring the absolute value of -4 is actually greater than the absolute value of -1, because 4 is greater than 1. What about the absolute value of two opposite numbers? Here I've got the absolute value of -3 and the absolute value of +3. Well, if you look, +3 is 3 units away from 0, so is -3. So the absolute value of -3 is 3, and the absolute value of +3 is also 3. Remember, absolute value is always positive because it's a measurement of distance. Therefore, these absolute values are equal. Something else you'll need to be able to do in this section is to be able to order integers. Some will be an absolute value, and some will just be plain integers. So here I'm being asked to order 11, the absolute value of -5, 2, the absolute value of 6, and the absolute value of -14 from least to greatest. In order to do that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot where these values would be on a number line. So first I've got the 11. So the value of 11 is right here on the number line. So I'm just going to plot it right above. So here's 11, right? Next I've got the absolute value of negative 5. So even though the number negative 5 is here, there's where negative 5 is, the absolute value of negative 5 is actually 5. So I'm going to put that up here where the positive 5 is, because that's the value of the absolute value of negative 5. Next I've got 2, which of course is right here. Here's 2. Then I've got the absolute value of 6. The absolute value of 6 will be located right here because the absolute value of 6 is 6. So I'm going to try to squeeze that in there. And then I've got the absolute value of negative 14, which is 14. So that's going to be located up here. There we go. So now when I order them, I'm going to order them from least to greatest, which means I'm going to start on the left and I'm going to move to the right. And when I write them down in order, I'm not going to put what they equal. I'm going to put the way the numbers were written in the original format. Okay? So the first value was a 2, and that was written as a 2. So I've got a 2. Next, it's the absolute value of negative 5. So I'm going to write that as the absolute value of negative 5. I'm not going to change that to the positive 5. Next is the absolute value of 6. Again, write it in the format that they give it to you. Then I've got an 11. And then the absolute value, rather, of negative 14. So when do we use integers in the real world? Well, we use them in the world of finance. When we talk about money, money coming in would be a credit, that would be a positive value, and money going out would be a debit, that would be a negative value. Another place we use it would be in measuring temperatures, right? So the picture on the left there, we've got the Arctic, and that temperature may be negative 20 degrees below 0, so negative 20 degrees Fahrenheit. Whereas the picture on the right, we've got a very hot desert there. That might be positive 101 degrees Fahrenheit. So we can use integers to model money, positive and negative, and temperatures, positive and negative. What about absolute value in the real world? Well, imagine that you are running a hotel or something, right? And you know you need to have your elevator serviced for every 5,000 floors that they travel. And so when you look at the information that the elevator gives you in a digital format, every floor it goes up is a positive value, every floor it goes down is a negative value. So you find out that it traveled up 2,101 floors and it traveled down 2,100 floors. So you have the values positive 2,101 and negative 2,100. Well, when you add them together, what do you think you get? That actually equals 1. So would it make sense that these elevators have only traveled 1 floor? No, of course not, right? So what you'd actually be looking for there is the absolute value. You'd have to add the absolute value of the two integers, which would be a positive 2,101 and positive 2,100, which would give you 4,201.